Good morning. So I hope you guys are doing well and dodging all this craziness that's going on with the world right now. So I got some chats opening up here. So 8 a.m. is in Pacific time, so LA time in California. So that's what all our streams go by, that time zone. So I'm actually in the East Coast, so it's actually 11 a.m. Where I am currently. So give me a shout out if you guys can hear me. We got a few people trickling in here. So good morning to you all. So if you guys are hanging in there with all this, I wanted to see how many of you guys and gals are at home working from home. And I wanted to see if you guys ended up doing this normally, because I end up working, normally I work from my office, detached from our LA office. So I'm pretty much always, I'm used to the working at home aspect. And it's kind of weird now with this coronavirus stuff because I now have, my kids are here. There's no school and my wife's at home. And so it's like chaos now. I just want all these people out of my space. So it's the opposite stress related stuff. So now I have people in my work from home space where normally I just have myself and my dogs. So it usually went from quiet to chaos. So today's stream, I'm going to go over some stuff, and then I have some things we're going to discuss that we're going to be doing here at Pixelogic for our streams coming the next week. So just to start, we've had a few updates, or one update actually. So the ZBrush core has been updated to 20.20.1.2. So if you have ZBrush core, there was a bug and a few bugs that were fixed in that. So the upgrade for ZBrush core is free, so you can go grab that and it will resolve some of those items. So little thing there has been a patch for ZBrush core since the last time I streamed. In addition to this, ZBrush 2020 now has a trial version that's out as well. And so if you know anyone that's at home and they're trying, to figure out something to do with themselves, point them to the trial and say, hey, you want to try digital sculpting? So we have a trial. You can sign it up. It's free. Go for 30 days. Also, if you're a student and maybe you don't have access to ZBrush at home now, so you used to have it, in the classroom and use it in that setting, you can download the trial and use that to, do your classwork, practice ZBrush, do all that sort of stuff. Next week, we're also here at Pixelogic, we're going to be doing developer streams every day for the next week and then the week after that, potentially till the end of this whole coronavirus stuff. And with this, we're going to focus on, trial users and ZBrush learning. So it's going to be kind of like a ZBrush live. And so the idea behind it is that you can go and you can download the trial or point one of your friends to, hey, go download the trial. And then we'll do online training through Twitch here, just like this. And go through and show the basics of ZBrush, how to navigate, how to move. That'll primarily be me and Paul and Daisuke. And so Daisuke is one of our Japanese developers. So we'll be going through and doing that stuff. And Daisuke is going to be focusing on ZBrush Core. And then me and Paul will be doing professional versions and possibly going to ZBrush Core every once in a while. But the plan with this is that we're going to be doing 2-hour streams where we can start and finish a project. So you can actually just get in to that stream and follow along with the trial version. Hopefully learn ZBrush and start making some stuff, especially if you're at home now and you're looking for stuff to do. So if you have a computer, now's the time. One thing with ZBrush 2, we have multiple avenues to get into the software. So we have a single user license that they'll be monthly, so you can do a monthly basis. You can do a 6 month, and those are both our subscription plans. So say you only want to, use ZBrush for maybe 2 months out of the year, you can sign up for just a monthly usage of it and then have it that way. Also, we have our single user Perpetual license, and for that, we never charge for upgrades. So I bought ZBrush when it was, I want to say $295 or $395, and never paid for an upgrade since. So bought it once and that was that. So there's multiple avenues to get into ZBrush. There's not just Perpetual. We do offer subscription now. And then as I mentioned a second ago, we also have the trial version. So you can grab that and try it out and see if it's something you like. and go that route. We also have ZBrush Core, and ZBrush Core is priced significantly less than the full version of ZBrush. So if you just want to mess with some stuff inside of ZBrush, see if it's something you want to do, that comes down to even a single monthly subscription is $10 a month. So if you have even kids at home and they have access to a computer, you will probably need like a tablet. I'd recommend a tablet or a basically a pen device to use it. But for the $10 a month, you can, you know, if your kids want to dabble in the art world and figure out what this digital sculpting stuff is, it's another great venue to go down and start learning. So I got some questions here. So I got people that, yes, Andreas is saying that he knows where all the bags of snacks are hidden at home. That's the way to do it. For rendering engines, TAC is asking about achieving a perfect render in ZBrush like we get in some rendering engines like Keyshot. So there are HDI rendering setups inside of ZBrush. You can use those to get some lighting information. It's not going to give you all the quite bounce stuff that like Keyshot has, so that's one of the reasons why we did a bridge with Keyshot, so you can actually take the ZBrush models and send them there. But you can get renders out of ZBrush. You can also render passes using the ZBrush to Photoshop plugin and get different passes going on, and then go into Photoshop and compositing them all together. Paul is the one to go to for any of the rendering stuff, and he'll actually be streaming today at 11 a.m. Pacific time, so that's LA time, and so he'll be going today for that. So if you're in that one, or you can go into his stream, I'd highly recommend asking him for doing the rendering. He's far better at it than I am. So I could show you how to do it, but I'm gonna have to like mangle my way through it. Paul's usually where he's got like that aspect of ZBrush, and so like if anyone has questions with rendering stuff, you usually just send them to Paul, and Paul will take care of you. So ask him about the rendering stuff. One more thing with ZBrush as well, just to mention with the trial, is that ZBrush is a CPU-based application. So what this means is if you have a computer, and like I'm running a 4th generation i7 on my laptop here right now, and you don't have to have a powerful graphics card. So I'm actually using a MacBook, and my MacBook's actually boot camped. And so I have like no graphics card capability in this machine at all, but ZBrush is all CPU based, so it doesn't care about your graphics card. So it would be nice to have a better graphics card in this machine, but ZBrush doesn't care. And so everything that I do inside of ZBrush is usually on machines that don't really have, you know, the top graphics cards. So one thing there with ZBrush as well, that it runs on pretty much everything. And so I have a few older machines that I'll use for support testing. And some of these are like Core 2 Duos, old Intel Core 2 Duos, and ZBrush still runs on it. So you can just download the trial and try it out, and it's CPU based, so as long as your computer is running, it can probably run ZBrush. All right, so I'm gonna get into some stuff today. So next week, as I said, we're gonna go into these developer streams. I'm gonna be going on Wednesday of next week, I think at 11 a.m. LA time, and Friday of next week at 11 a.m. LA time. And those are gonna be going back to the basics. So we're doing kind of like a Z Classroom Live, and so we're gonna go through like the initial getting into ZBrush and doing stuff like that. So for today, before I get into all those beginner stuff, I wanted to go through and just do the things I like in ZBrush. And so I'm gonna model a quick robot here, and I'm gonna use some different processes. We've had some stuff come across Twitter in the past week about, you know, doing some Z scripting stuff too. So I'm gonna show you how to automate some things today as well. So I'm gonna go through this. Hey Cameron, nice to see you. Hope you're doing well too. All right, so for today, I'm gonna model, this is one of the processes I really like doing inside of ZBrush, and it kind of gives you like a sketch type feeling, and that's using Shadowbox. So I'm gonna start a model here with Shadowbox, and then I'm gonna clean it up with Zmodeler, and then hopefully we'll see how time goes. I'll show you how to automate some stuff, and then we'll go into one of my favorite tricks involving surface noise and alphas to get details. So here I just have ZBrush launched, and I just have a sphere here loaded in. And what I'm going to do is I'm just using this as my base starting primitive here, just to have something loaded. And then I'm going to convert this to a shadow box. So I'm going to go to the tool palette, I'm going to open up the geometry tab, and then go to Shadowbox down here. And what Shadowbox is going to do, it's going to take whatever model you have selected, and it's going to convert it into this three-sided cube. So I'm going to come in here and I'm going to set my resolution to this, say 256. And for this resolution slider and the polish, just think of this very similar as Dynamesh. So you have a Dynamesh resolution, which is the amount of topology that's going to be flooded through that volume, and then you have a polish that's going to apply some smoothing to give that Dynamesh, a little softness, right? So it's the same principle inside of Shadowbox. So this is basically your resolution, and then the polish is going to be how smooth that's going to be. So I'm going to turn my polish down to like 1 on this, and so I'm going to keep that at 1, and my resolution 256. And then I'm going to activate Shadowbox. Now you'll see what this did with the sphere here is that it took the sphere that I had as geometry, and then it generated this shadow mask from that geometry. And the mask is going across all these planes here, and so it's just generating a form based on shadows, and that's what Shadowbox is doing. So whatever you have shadows on these 3 sides of the box, you're going to get geometry generated from it. And so if you have an object like a primitive and you just activate Shadowbox with it, it's going to take that object, generate shadows on each of the sides, and then it's going to give you something like this. So you can see my sphere here is kind of turned into this weird pixelized cube thing here. So I don't really want that sphere, so I want to make my own shadows. So I'm going to hold down Control and just drag off to clear my mask, and that's going to clear the Shadowbox. Now with the Shadowbox, you have these different walls, okay? So you have a back wall, and you can kind of see it based on this little demo head up here. So we have a back wall, we have a side wall, and then we have a floor wall, okay? So if you come across the back wall and you simply just hold down the Control key and mask, this is going to apply a mask to that wall, and when you release, it's going to take that mask and turn it into geometry. So basically I've come through, drew a mask, because it's just drawing in 2D, and then it's going to give me a 3D shape. Now you'll notice that I have some stair stepping along the edges here, and this is going to be correlated to this polish slider. So I turned my polish slider down, so as I drew this, I'm getting some stair stepping. And I did this on purpose for this because I want to do some cleanup with this later. If I increase this polish slider, then this will be a lot smoother through here. But basically the Shadowbox is really nice because you can come in and you can just start just with this back wall here, I can start just masking and I can start generating geometry. And so it's very fast to come in and just quickly sketch something out and get it to generate. Now, in addition to the back wall, which is always going to give you a set thickness, and so primarily when I use Shadowbox, I usually end up just using this. I don't really go and touch the other 2 sides. Now, if I go and add masking to the other 2 sides, now it's going to treat this like an orthographic view for, say, like a CAD application, right? So this is profile 1 over here, and then if I come over here and apply some masking, you'll see now it's using this as another variable. So it's using this, and now I'm getting this shape, okay? And then if I put, let's say, a little unmasked portion there, you'll see it's going to update across there. So now it's using both these sides to generate the shape. And then I can also throw in the 3rd side down here, so I can add some masking like, say, this, and now you can see it's only going to affect the area where that mask is. So now it's using all 3 planes like that to get that shape out of it. So that's what the Shadowbox functionality does. So I'm going to go and clear this out, and I'm just going to come to the back side here. And now I want to just start sketching some stuff. So I'm going to make sort of a mech because that's what I feel like doing today. You guys are in for the ride. So I'm just going to start sketching some forms here with this, just using masking. You can also use any of the mask brushes as well. So I can use mask lasso to get shapes. You can unmask, and so it's very quick to come in and start generating quick designs, kind of playing with shapes and forms, just strictly with shadow. And so I'm gonna come through and start, manipulating some of the shadow here to get a shape. Now another thing with this shadow is that right now I can't really see what's behind it. So if I draw this mask out, I can kind of tell where it's gonna go, but I can't really see what I'm affecting. So what you want to do most of the time if you're just using this back wall is you want to come down here and activate this transparency option down here and then turn off ghost. And so now I'm going to be able to see through the mesh that's going to be created, and I'm just going to see the shadow. So this will allow me to focus on just the shadow portion of it, and I know that wherever that shadow is, I'm going to get geometry. So a little handy thing there with that. So I'm going to go back to my mask pen and clear that out, and now I'm just going to start sketching something. So this robot I kind of envisioned in my head has different kind of elements to it, and with Shadowbox I could come through and start drawing out, the exact kind of structure I want out of this. So I could come through and do, whatever I want in here, playing with the shapes, playing with the forms, until I got a shape that I like. And I could do, say, the whole kind of robot design in here. So like, if I want some arms, I want to have a backpack, I can go through and do all this in one Shadowbox if I liked. However, what I want to do is I want to break this up into different parts. So instead of just creating the entire silhouette of the whole robot, arms, torso, legs, head, everything in one shadow box, I'm going to break it up into multiple shadow boxes. And this is going to give me a larger area to work with in terms of resolution on the shadow box. And it's also going to give me more flexibility. So I can just generate one part, say like the head, in one shadow box, and then generate the body in another shadow box. And then I can have those already broken out into different sections, because that's how I want to work when I get this kind of base shape done. Like I want to modify them individually, not as this one solid chunk. So I'm just going to focus on like one element here now. And with this, you'll see me do a lot of things. We'll just come in and apply, say, a mask. And you want to kind of make sure that your mask is solid all the way through, because you can get holes in Shadowbox pretty quick in terms of making different structures. So you can come in and add all sorts of things, and you're going to get that shape carved out. So if you're going to try to make a solid object, make sure you have a solid form. The other thing with this is that you'll see when I paint stuff, I'll come through and use that mask, and this is going to come into like rounded, right? So this is a stroke, and since I have that fall off on that brush, it's going to round out. And so what I end up doing is I'll make the positive stroke, and then I'll come back in with negative, so holding down Control and Alt, and then I'll hack off the edges to get that kind of harsh shape. So I'm using the one form to get it, and then the other form to kind of bring those edges back. So positive masking to get my initial shape, negative masking to add harsh edges. And this for me just goes, a lot quicker in getting different shapes. And so for this, I'm gonna do something like that. I was messing with some different kind of designs, and today you're getting free flow. There's no set mesh that I'm focusing on here, just messing with some shapes, trying things out, like it, don't like it. But it's very fun to go in, and if you have a rough sketch or anything you want to do, go ahead and do it. So we're going to go ahead and we're going to lock this one in. So to do this, I'm just going to come over here and now deactivate Shadowbox, and it's going to take this, and you'll see that now I have that as geometry. So now I can come in and I can start adding my extra parts, right? So I can come over here and click duplicate. So now I have two of these, and on my second one here, I'm now going to activate Shadowbox again, and then clear this out. So now I have my one shape that I can still see, which is my original one, right? And now I have a new shadow box. Now with this new shadow box, I can move this too. So let's say I want to, place it up here to work on, say, like a head design. And now I come up here and add, a head in right here. So maybe we'll do, we're gonna be very boxy right now. And this is kind of how my shape brain is working today. It varies on the day, the time of the day. So I got that, and then we're going to get out Shadowbox, so that one's now geometry. And then I'm going to duplicate that one again, Shadowbox, move this one down. Oop, let me clear that mask first. Move it down to say here. You can scale the Shadowbox too. There's a bunch of different things you can kind of do with this. And so now I'm getting those overlapping pieces. So say this was like a shoulder guard, and now I have another subtool as a Shadowbox. I can still see my older parts, but now I can come in and add, this other detail in there. And this is something you couldn't do if you just tried to do this all in a single Shadowbox. So now I can end up starting to get this kind of layered effect and then get out of Shadowbox. So now I have this geometry sitting on the other one. And so I'm just gonna work out a quick bust here. I was pondering going all the way through, but I think you guys get the gist of what's going on here. So masking and Shadowbox. All right, let's see. I got some questions here. I'm gonna try to keep on top of questions too today. Can you load textures in the Shadowbox planes? Yes, you can. So the Shadowbox planes will take a texture map, and in Lightbox, if we hit Comm on our keyboard to go up here and click on Lightbox, there is, let me find out where these are. There's an example one here. See if I can find it. Wait for it. Wait for it. So in Lightbox, if you go to Project, and there is a Shadowbox 128 ZPR right here. And if you load this in, I'm not going to do it now because it's going to overwrite the scene I'm in. But you load this in, and this will have a texture map that corresponds with the Shadowbox. And you can actually export that out, take it into Photoshop, add your black and white silhouettes to each of the sides, and then bring it back in and apply it to the plane. And then all you need to do is go to the masking area and do mask by intensity. So masking, mask by color, mask by intensity. And it'll look at that texture map that's loaded on your model and mask by that. And then it will just automatically populate the Shadowbox with those masks and give you the geometry shape. So 100% Rue, you can definitely import in textures into the shadow planes. And the example project for that is in Lightbox, Project, Shadowbox 128. So we have another question here by Jimmy, and he was asking about, these white circles that sometimes live on sliders inside of ZBrush. So these circles will run a different algorithm. So if they're on or off, it's going to do a different algorithm or a different process based on what that slider is. So for this polish one here, we have an open circle and a closed circle. And these are going to run two different polishing algorithms on your mesh. And the majority of the time, if the circle is open, it's going to give a more aggressive polish than if the circle is closed. Okay, so if you ever see any of those, like where's the Dynamesh one has two with blur. So more aggressive is going to be open usually, and less aggressive is going to be closed. And so oftentimes you can even see these kind of, just click it and then change the slider and you'll see it update usually most of the time. So this blur one definitely will update on the fly after you have a Dynamesh. So that's what those white circles are. All right, so now that I've got that one, get out of Shadowbox there, and we'll do, let's see, I need to get my arm in here, and then we'll start messing this up. Got another question here. So, have a question about mask pen and using on the border to create a sharp clean. So that is what I was kind of trying to relay. So I have my Shadowbox shape here, and what I end up doing when I'm masking is that I'll use a positive form. So I'm holding down Control and adding my mask, right? But since my brush is round, right, you see all these edges are rounded, right? And so I don't want them round. I want them to be harsh, right? I want them to be sharp edges. So what I do is I'm still holding down Control with the mask pen, and I'm gonna hold down Alt to make it a negative mask. So now I'm masking negatively, and then I'll just hit the edges, right? So I'm coming across the edges, and since now I'm cutting those off, the brush fall off isn't going to affect it. So now I'm getting a sharp edge. So actually coming across like this, I can now get those edges to be sharp. So if I tried to draw them by hand, even if I had like a really small draw size here, and tried to get those edges as harsh as possible, you see they're going to be still rounded based on my brush size. Now I could grab an alpha and try to do that, but the alpha is also going to have, you know, just like that square, so if I don't line it up exactly, it's not going to give me that nice flush edge. So what I end up doing is I'll use masking with unmask, so Control plus Alt, and then drag, and I'll unmask those areas, and that will end up coming through and giving me a harsh edge on those areas. So a little thing there with masking that I use for going through and unmasking stuff to get harsh edges. So that's gonna need some arms. So I'm gonna come back and I have my shadow box, I just moved it, and now I'm gonna give him some arm things here. And for his arms, I usually end up, I like doing some like weird angle stuff every once in a while. I like my mechs to have kind of curves to them. they're going to be harsh anyway, so I try to at least get some round shapes into them. And this one I'm thinking, you know, for his arm here, he'll kind of come up, and I was thinking about giving him a round circle joint, but I'm not going to use anything circular at this stage with Shadowbox because it's not going to be as round as I want it to be, and I can easily just add a primitive to there. And if I don't like this, I can just come back in and undo that as well. So we'll go with that for now. And then get out of Shadowbox. All right, so now I've got these shapes. I'm gonna turn off my floor grid here. And this is what I have. So I have my base silhouettes. So yes, Shadowbox has, another question, tangent. So Shadowbox has its own resolution. So it's right here. So if I want to increase the resolution of it, just before you activate it, just come over here and change this. And this is going to function like the Dynamesh resolution. So it's going to be basically the same thing. So if you know that your object, you want it at a resolution of say 64 for the size of your mesh, put it the Shadowbox at 64 as well. And then after this is set, you know, you can change the polish if you want, toggle the slider, and then when you activate Shadowbox, it's now going to use that resolution. So you can see how much more resolution this has now versus the one I had before. And then I'm also have that polish kicking in, so this part is actually now smoother too, right? So you can definitely change, you know, all sorts of things with Shadowbox with that. And one thing with it too is a lot of people will end up using it to design, you know, quick shapes. So coming in and doing stuff like this, and then you can also get, say, the mask lasso. So I usually basically use it for making starter shapes. I don't often end up coming in and using it 100% for creating final forms, but you definitely can. Like, you can just use this to model all your parts. And then, you know, that's pretty much, you're almost done there. And then I'll show you what I do with my other shapes, but then I go back and model them. But if you want to, you know, you can basically use this to model your entire pieces, and then you can decimate them down, you can Zremesh them, you can do whatever you want and call it done. So it all depends. I mean, there's no right or wrong to using Shadowbox. A lot of people that do jewelry design and stuff will come through and just use Shadowbox to make assets, and that's it, because it's very easy to do. And it gives a really nice result. So this is looking like a knife handle, right? So, I mean, if that's all you need for your knife handle, you're done. So for the moving the Shadowbox, so after you're in Shadowbox mode, this is just basically a piece of geometry. So you can move this wherever you want. So you can just take the Gizmo 3D and move it, and then scale it. You know, you can. It's basically already set, right? So you've turned it on, you've got your resolution, and now it's just geometry. And anywhere it is, it doesn't matter. If I apply a mask over here, it's now going to generate that shape over there. So all I did to do it is, I'll just take a piece here. Let's do this one. Let's just take like a Polymesh 3D, I'm gonna go to geometry, set my resolution to 256, activate it. So since I had a piece of topology in my scene before I ran it, it's gonna take that mesh and generate shadows from it. So this is what I'm getting from that 3D star. Then I clear my mask out. And at this stage, you can do whatever you want with the shadow box. So I can move it around, scale it up, and then whenever I mask on it again, it's still gonna generate that shape where the shadow box is. So it's handy for definitely changing stuff to increase size, making it smaller, making it bigger. So you're not just constrained to where that shadow box is when it kicks in. You can definitely move it around and play with it. So let me know if that makes sense. All right, I'm gonna go back to my model here. All right, so for these parts, now I wanna clean these up. So these are just my initial shapes, and the whole idea behind the Shadowbox functionality is that instead of me having to go through and model these parts initially, I can just use masking. So it ends up being more of like a paint generation, right? So I'm coming in, I'm just making a stroke, and it's giving me a result. So I don't have to think about anything other than, hey, I like this shape, I like this silhouette, and then I get geometry out of it. So that's the difference between, like, because I could definitely just went in and started modeling this, right? I could have taken a sphere and started doing it that way. But it just depends on the day, the time, you know, my mood. You know, today I just wanted to make a stroke and have it captured, right? So I just wanted to say draw and turn that drawing to geometry. And so Shadowbox was the process for today. So now that I have this, I want to go through and I want to clean this up some, right? So this model right now, it has some rough edges, and I could have applied that blur or that polish to it, and that would have smoothed it out some. But it's also got a lot of topology. And so what I want to do is I want to modify this, because basically my robot right now is all stacked, right? So it's all on top of each other. And so I want to take, say, it's his body here, you know, and I want it to be wider up here. And then this is that kind of middle section. I want that to be wider. I want, you know, 2 arms, not just 1. I want his head to be wider, maybe have some more detail. Different attributes to it. Not just leave it like this where it's just stacked on top of each other. The Shadowbox also would be an awesome thing for, say, weapons. So it works really well. So if you have like silhouettes of all different weapon parts, you can load those into Shadowbox, get your parts, and then do a similar thing that I'm gonna do here with this robot. So for these parts, I'm gonna apply a cleanup process to this. And my cleanup process involves a few steps. So the first thing I'm gonna do is, you'll notice that with the result here, let me turn on a brighter matte cap. You see that Shadowbox is going to give me this geometry that has multiple polygroups. So it's going to give me a polygroup on the front, on the back, and then along that middle side. So I have 3 nice polygroups through here. And with these polygroups, what I can do is I can polish this, right? So I can come down to the deformation palette here, and I can go to this polish by groups. And here's another use of the white circle. So with this on, when I do this polish by groups, it's not going to be as strong as it is if I have it as an open circle. So if I polish by groups right now, you can see this is what I'm getting. So it polished quite a bit, but I have this little kind of warpy stuff through here, and it didn't really polish all this. So what I'm going to do for polish by groups is I'm turning this off, because I want the strongest polish possible. And this is usually how I work inside of ZBrush. I want like the strongest versus like the least strong. So you'll see me if you ever watch any of my other streams that I'm sculpting stuff, I always turn my smooth to smooth stronger, because I want it to smooth fast. I don't want it to smooth lightly. So same thing I do with my polish by groups. I just crank it up. And so for this, I end up polishing, and you can see with that white circle open, it gave me a more aggressive polish, and now you can see what I got on the result there. So all those striations that were down here are gone. This is like a lot smoother and flatter through that part of the model. And so for this, let me turn a little bit too crazy there for me, color-wise. And then now I usually run this a few times, so polish it once or twice. So I'm gonna do it again, and then again. Now, correspondingly, you could also, if you do any of the things in the deformation panel here once, you can come down on the bottom, and you have an option to repeat to active and repeat to other. And this will allow you to just repeat that process. So instead of going the slider and cranking it up to 100 multiple times, you can come down here and do repeat to active or repeat to other, and it'll just replay it again. So another little handy thing with these little repeats buttons down here, if you find yourself having to come up here and do this kind of scroll action multiple times, you can just do it once, repeat to active, and it'll repeat the process. So I took that mesh and I've now polished it 3 times at 100% with Polish by Groups and the open circle. Now after this, I now have this result. So it's nice and smooth. This is a lot better than what I had initially, except it's still, you know, very dense. So if I turn my polyframes there, this is quite a bit of topology. And what I want to do is I want to use, say, like the Zmodeler Brush to like modify this some, maybe clean up some of the edges, do some things like that. And so I want it lower, even lower than this, right? So I'm going to go up to the Zremesher now. And in here, I want to Zremesh this to get lower topology across the surface here. And so for this, I need to change a few options as well. So first, I want to keep the groups. So I want to keep these nice edge groups I have, so this front, middle, and back, and I want them all to stay. And if you turn keep groups on, this is also going to help with your topology, right? So when Zremesher is now going to Zremesh this model, it's going to try to hold that group's border. So it's going to try to hold this edge right through there, and I should have a nice edge that's going to go around the model on both sides. So one thing there with using the groups with Zremesher, it's going to hold those group edges as best as possible. So that's a good thing there. Next thing with the target polygon count, I'm just going to keep it low, say 5, and then I want to keep this on adaptive over here. And so now I'm just going to Zremesh that. And you'll see this is the result I got from Zremesher. So pretty good through here. So I've kept those edges nice and clean all the way around, and that's a complete edge loop, you know, all the way around that edge there. And then it's, you know, give me the sides and then the top. So this is a really good, you know, Zremesh result, right? Took a second. You know, if I wanted to model this by hand, definitely I could. It's nothing complex, but in terms of processes, using Zremesher, you know, usually is a huge time saver. Sometimes like these areas down here aren't, you know, you're 100% perfect if you were probably doing it manually. But for a second process that took 1 button click, it does a really good job. So now that I've Zremeshed this once, it's still a little bit too dense. So I don't want to go in and use this with the Zmodeler Brush. These polygons are really still too tiny. So I'm going to come over here and now I'm going to select half right here. And this is still in the Zremesher area. And what half is going to do, it's going to give me half of the polygons that I currently have when I perform the next Zremesh. So I'll do my first one with adaptive, which was at that 5,000 polygons. And so it gave me, you know, about 5,000 points. And now I want to cut it down even more. So I'm going to turn this half on. So it's going to look at this point count and then try to give me half of what that point count is with the new geometry I'm going to get. And so for this, I'll run it again. And so there's the half result. And so this is still a little bit too much geometry. So I'm going to run it another time. And now I have something like this. So went through, ran Zremesher once, turned on half, ran it again, and then again. And now I'm getting topology that's a little bit lighter. Now I could keep going on this, so I could Zremesher one more time, and this is going to give me this kind of result. And this may be where I'm going to keep this one. So this is a lot easier for me to select with, say, the Zmodeler Brush to model stuff out. So I've just dropped the polygon count significantly. But the shape, you know, the silhouette and the shape is still pretty consistent. So now that I have this, I'm going to go through and clean this up a little bit more. So I'm going to go to the edge loop option here, and in here there is a delete loops. And what delete loops is good for is anything that has like a cylindrical property, like a cylinder, or stuff like this, right? So these edge loops in here, in order to keep this shape or this form, they're not really needed, right? So that you can see that this border and this border are constant, and these edges through here are kind of wasting space. So you can delete these unwanted loops. And if you have a cylinder, this is really nice to go through and clean up any unwanted height divides that are in your mesh, and you can also use it on things like this. So if I click delete loops, you can see it's going to remove those loops in the middle there. So now I have this nice solid strip of topology going all the way around. So a little cleanup thing there. And then the next thing I want to do with this mesh is if I rotate to say here, you're going to see that this isn't symmetrical all the way across, right? So I've got this edge and this edge, but they don't really line up. And so I want this to be symmetrical down the middle. Now I could have processed it with Zremesher with symmetry on, and that would have helped. Zremesher would have used the symmetry and looked at it, but I didn't do that this time, so I need to perform a mirror and weld. So I'm going to come down here to the Tool, Geometry, Modify Topology, Mirror and Weld area. And this one, when I was using Shadowbox, another thing too, you got to remember that I created all these shapes like this. So here's the front of my model. All right, so if I came over here and did a default mirror and weld, it's going to go from the X symmetry, which is basically going to go down this middle line here of that Y. And so if I click this, this is the result I'm going to get. So that's not what I want. So on the mirror and weld, we have these little buttons here, X, Y, and Z, and these are your axis options. And so we want to come through and just turn on Z and then click mirror and weld. And now that's going to give me a center point down the middle there. So it's mirrored the Z axis, which was that front and back. And when I click it, I now have a center line. And so center line is also good for this mesh because I want to do it with symmetry. So I want to make sure I have a center line. So that is the cleanup process for each of those. So now that I've done one of these, well, now I got to repeat this process for this one, this one, this one, and this one. So that's a lot of different little parts there, right? And so you can already see that I had to go through and click, a bunch of buttons to get this to this result. But I don't want to have to go through and do that multiple times. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to make a macro and I'm going to record it, and then I can just replay that back across each one of these subtools. So this process is actually fairly easy, and if you ever come across anything inside of ZBrush, especially that just involves button presses, not really sculptural details, but say like what I just did. So I did a polish by groups, did Zremesher, set it to a half, did a delete loops, and then mirror and weld. All those things are just button clicks, right? So you can automate all those through scripting. And the scripting process, can be very simple. It can also be very complex. So there's different levels of it, but for automation of things that I just did, it's pretty simple to get a script created quickly. So I'm gonna take this second piece and go through that process again, but this time, as I'm going through it, I'm going to generate a macro. And so a macro is an option here that lives in the macro palette, and these will go through and apply different things to it. Now these macros here live in they're all text files. Anything that's in a macro is a text file. So you can actually open all these up and look at the code for them and see what they're doing. And so if I navigate to that folder, so this is the Pixelogic ZBrush 2020.1.1 Z Startup Macros Miscellaneous. You can see these are where all the macros live. And so you can see all these in here correlate to the ones that are in those menus. Now, I'm going to go through and I'm going to select one that I know doesn't have a lot of code. It's very simple. And so one of these would be like the tray left and tray right. And these macros allow you to click a button to close your left tray or right tray inside of ZBrush. And so what I'm going to do with these, and I'm just going to select one of these, so the text version of it. You don't want the ZBrush compiled version, you want the text. And I'm just going to right click, and then I'm going to use a text editor called Sublime. So any text editor will work. You can open in Notepad, you can open up in WordPad on OS X. I like using Sublime, is what I've been using recently. And it is a text editor. You can find information on it right there. So Sublime Text, you can just do a search for that and grab it. It works great for Z scripting, so making macros, making plugins, making Z scripts. There also is a syntax that you can get for ZScript, and it will color code the stuff in there. So it's really, really handy application. I highly recommend it for scripting stuff. So this is the left tray macro here. And this one's organized just a little bit here, so you can kind of see what's happening. There should be comments on all these, so you can kind of open them up and see what the process is. And so for this one's just defining a routine. So this is the process that we can just keep repeating. And then I'm just calling the process from a button. And then this option right here is just telling me, hey, whatever this text file's name is, that's what the macro is going to be called. And then this is what the macro's hover text will be. And then we're going to run that routine, which is going to close the tray. So this is a very, very simple version of a macro. And so for this, what I'm going to do is I'm going to record some processes inside of ZBrush to generate the code I need to put in this macro. And to do this, I'm gonna go back to ZBrush here, and there's two ways you can kind of do this. You can do it in the macro tab into a new macro right here. And this is gonna set up a macro for you. So it's gonna go through and record this stuff, and then it's gonna generate a new button here that'll allow you to click that button and process it. So that's one way you can do it, and that's gonna cut a lot of your corner stuff out of it. But it's also may give you some stuff that's gonna contain, you know, clicks and canvas rotations and other things like that. So it may not be as clean, and it's also just gonna flood it all together. So what I usually end up doing is I'll record anything I usually end up doing through the ZScript record process over here. Basically the same thing, it's recording the same information. The only thing that this process is doing is it's not gonna automatically create the macro for you. So two different ways to kind of record here. So I'm gonna click record, and you may get this little initialize thing that's gonna pop up and ask you if you want to initialize ZBrush. This was basically this thing that pops up for the initialization is for if you want to launch ZBrush and click a button and do a whole bunch of stuff, right? So you want to launch it, you want to generate a sphere, you want to sculpt this, this, and this, and then have it done. So you could send it to somebody and be like, hey, press play, and it'll do this thing right there in front of their eyes. I don't want that. I want to keep what I have currently, so I do not want to fully initialize ZBrush. I just want to record steps. So I'm going to put no to this, so it is not going to initialize, and now it's just put me in record mode. So now that I'm in record mode, you want to make sure that you only click the stuff that you need. You can click anything you want, but then you have to clean it up later. So I'm going to first go and just do the stuff I know that I need. So the first process, I came down here to this polish by groups. I want to make sure that I open that circle, right? So process one, clicking that. And that is now storing that in that recording thing. So it's capturing that opening the circle there from that closed circle to open circle. Next, we're gonna do the polish by groups here. And I'm gonna take this, I'm gonna crank this to 100, right? So that's that process there. Now I know I wanna repeat that 3 times. So I could set this up later on, or I can just do it here really quick just to do it. So I'm just gonna polish this again, and then polish this again. So there's my 3 polishes. Next, I know I want to run Zremesher, so I'm going to come over here to the Zremesher tab here. Last time I turned on this keep groups, so I want to make sure I turn that on. So that's going to now store that in this macro. Next, I want to set my Polygon Count to 5, so I'm just going to make sure this is locked in. So I'm going to come over here, type in 5 and hit enter. And that will make sure that if this ever changes or does something different, when I run this macro, it's always going to change it back to 5. So even if it already said 5, you probably want to go through and make sure that you change that variable so that it gets locked in. Because if that's what you want to make sure you put it in the macro. And then we want to make sure we have adaptive on, so I'm just going to toggle that on and off just to create a stored state in the macro that I can then edit. And then now I'm going to click Zremesher, and that's going to process that. And now this was the next part of the Zremesher stuff here, so I want to make sure I turn on half. And I'm going to process again, and process again. And that looks pretty good. We'll do it one more time. So 3 Zremeshes. Now I did that delete loops. So I'm gonna come up here to the edge loop, delete loops. That's gonna get stored. Now I'm gonna go down to the mirror and weld. Remember, I need to change this to Z. So I'm gonna turn off the X and then turn on Z, and then now click mirror and weld. And then there we go. So that has now recorded all those steps for that macro, right? Those are the processes I want to do on that next subtool, and the next one, the next one. Anytime I go through and make geometry with Shadowbox, and then I need to clean it up, that's the process I want to do. So that's done. I'm going to come up to the ZScript tab here, and I'm going to click End Record. And this is now going to allow me to save this to my desktop. So I'm just going to save that out. You're going to get a little thing that's going to ask if you want to store image channels. And so this image channel thing comes into play oftentimes if you ever do a document export to export an image out, or if you try to export out the entire ZBrush user interface, or if you save a texture map and it may pop up and give you this. Now what this is telling you is that there is a material index, and it wants to know if it wants to save it. This material index is your material for mRGB. So normally when you have an image map, it contains RGB, and that's pretty much it. Well, inside of ZBrush, we have this material modifier, and the material modifier is going to throw a fourth channel into the mix. So that is what this is asking you about. Hey, do you want to store this fourth channel, which is the material? So when you store a Z-script and it records, it's basically going to take just a screen grab of your screen. And now, since the screen grab contains a material, which is this matte cap gray being applied to this mesh here, it's saying, hey, do you want to store this? I don't want to store this right now, so I'm just going to click no. But if you ever see that, this right here, it's related to the material channel in a texture, so the M channel in mRGB. And most applications for any image stuff is just RGB, so you can usually just hit no to that. So with that, now I have that, and now I'm going to go back over to Sublime here, and I'm going to open it up. So actually, let's just do this quick. So we had a question asking about, is there a way to change? Oh man, we're all over the place. I don't know why we did not want to open with Sublime. Press the wrong button. All right, there we go. There we go. All right, so we had a question asking if there's a way to assign another shortcut to the spacebar. Unfortunately, there is not. The spacebar is always going to go to this menu here, which is the kind of pop-up menu, or it's going to go to the Zmodeler menu. So the spacebar is always set to one of those options. If you want to bind anything else to a hotkey, you can do it, but the spacebar currently in ZBrush 2020 is always going to go to that menu. I will pass along the request to the development team now. All right, so this is what was recorded with the macro I did, right? And so this is why oftentimes you don't really want to go through and just record a macro and just use that as it is, because you'll see down here I've got all this canvas stroke stuff, and this isn't needed, right? So this is actually me going on the canvas and rotating the model. You know, then I did some other stuff, and then I rotated the model again. So this stuff in here is just could cause issues if you store a macro and then you try to run it. It could use this canvas stroke somewhere on your canvas, and that could end up messing up a model when you actually apply this macro. So if you record anything with macros, if you're, just to double check, open it up and look and make sure you didn't like come in and do any craziness. So I, even trying as hard as possible not to go through and make a stroke, click in the canvas, do anything like that, I still ended up getting 2 canvas strokes out of my record. So the recording stuff is what I usually end up doing. I usually always record stuff because for me, even just copying and pasting this kind of stuff is quicker than me remembering it. Like I can pretty much, do this by hand if I need to, but I'll still end up recording the process quick. So I at least get a kind of template or a flow of what I want to do with the macro, with the script, and then use this in the one that I'm going to generate. Another thing inside of ZBrush here, if you hover over any button and hold Control, let me get a, I don't know why we're all up in space there. And so if I go over the delete button, actually delete's not a good one, let's find. Let's get a good one here. Here, mRGB, there you go. So if you hover over any button inside of ZBrush and you hold Control, this is going to bring you up some help text or auto notes. And down at the very bottom, you'll see the button path. And so if you ever need to set something or check something in Z-scripting, the button path is what you're going to be doing. So you can see right there, that's draw, RGB, and then you've got rotate, which is this transform rotate. So these are those little things at the very bottom is going to show you in scripting what that button would be. So if I wanted to use this clone option here, I would call that tool clone option. If I did import, it would be tool import. And so you can use this option here to kind of go in and see what those buttons are mapped to inside of ZBrush. But also just recording the script is going to give you that information. So you can see like this one's tool geometry keep groups. That's the button that was on Zremesher that I clicked to make sure the groups are kept. And so you can do recording, it's going to give you that same information. So it's sometimes faster, just do the process quick and get the names of the buttons, especially if you don't remember exactly what they're named. So now that I have my script here, I'm going to remove the stuff I don't need here really quick, just to clear this out. So my Polygon count, this is when I changed it. So the first time, it was set to 5 already, but then I moved the slider to get back to 5 and then typed in 5. And so it just gave me this double kind of Polygon count. So I don't need one of these, so I'm going to remove that. And then we've got the unpressing adaptive and then pressing adaptive. So this is just to make sure that I could store that record of that adaptive process. So I'm going to get rid of the unpress. I don't need that. So bye-bye unpress. Then this one here is the Zremesher call. So what this is doing, it's going to export out a temporary file and then call Zremesher. So we don't want to touch that. This is when I set the process to half for that half resolution. Then we did the Zremesher process 2 more times, so that's good. This canvas stroke I don't need, so that's going away. Then we ran Zremesher the 3rd time, so that was the one that cleaned up that middle loop just a little bit further. Then we did the delete loops, which got rid of the middle lines. Then we have these mod sets here, and this was setting the mirror and weld axis. So the 0, 1 was turning everything off because of that X on by default. So I need to get rid of 0 and then leave the one that's 4. And the mod set value here is a binary format. So 0, 1, that process through there. So make sure that when you're doing this, the 4 is actually what's going to trigger the Z-axis there. And then this is the mirror and weld process. And then at last, I don't need this canvas stroke down here. So that can go away if I can actually select it. I don't have a mouse hooked up today, so it's a little crazy. And this should now give me my process for this script here. And so what I'm going to do is I'm going to copy this. So I'm going to grab all this and copy. And then I'm going to go back to my left tray over here. And I'm just going to save this out as a new macro here. So once again, right now I've just opened up the left tray to modify that to kind of see the code in there. But I'm just going to save this as another one. So I'm going to go File, Save As. And we're going to save this as, what are we going to call this? What are we going to call it today? Let's call Shadowbox Cleanup. All right. So now I have a new macro called Shadowbox Cleanup. Now if I go back into ZBrush here and go to macros and reload it, it should pop up. You're going to see it's a tiny button. Tiny button. And we don't really want the, we want it to be long so I can actually read Shadowbox Cleanup. And so what controls the size of the button is these values down here. And you can type in decimal values in Z scripting. I usually end up just using fractions. It's a lot easier. If I know I want the button to be half size, it's just 1 divided by 2 rather than 0.5. If I want a 4th size, I want an 8th size, whatever, you just put the fraction value there. A little bit quicker. So for this, if I wanted to be full size, just set that to 1. And then now I can save that. Now go back in ZBrush, macro, reload. And now my Shadowbox Cleanup button is nice and big. Now when I click Shadowbox Cleanup right now, what it's going to do is just going to close my tray. Because that's all that, I just resaved that tray file. So if I come through here and click this, you can see it's going to open that up. And then if I click it again, it's going to close it. So partial Shadowbox workshop, Shadowbox or Z-script tangent is what it is. So it started off with a Shadowbox creation. We had a question asking if this was the Z-script workshop. It's kind of right now. We went into a Z-script tangent, little macroing. And so this is still just using this left tray toggle. So when I click that button, it's loading this macro. It's running it, so this is the run process down here. It's then going to call the routine, and that routine is the left tray toggle. Then it's going to do this stuff, and then it's going to exit out. So it's closing and opening and closing the tray right now. So I want to add my routine for this Shadowbox cleanup. So I'm going to add some lines here. We're going to define my routine, and this is what we're going to call Shadowbox Cleanup. And then I want to go to the code that I copied. It says here, just make sure I copy that again. And now I'm just going to paste that right there. And then I get a little bit crazy, so I'm going to tab those. And now I have this as that process. So now this is routine. Definitely if you start doing custom Z-script stuff, start working with routines. Do it as soon as possible because it's going to make your code a lot cleaner. And I always end up hitting this this option here for the text, and I changed the font. That drives me nuts. There we go. It's like Alt-Shift, and it's a common ZBrush command, and so I just accidentally click it every once in a while, and then my font inside of Sublime goes small. All right, so now I have this new routine. So I don't need this left tray toggle anymore, so I'm going to remove that. And now shadow box cleanup. And now I have that done, okay? So now at this stage, I could delete this if I wanted. It's not doing anything right now, so it's not hurting anything, so I'm just gonna leave it. And so I just have this routine, Shadowbox cleanup, and when I click the button now, actually we'll rename this to Cleans Up Shadowbox. There we go. Now when I click this, it's gonna process this routine and it's gonna do those steps that I already did, right? So now I don't have to do this multiple times, so I'm gonna save this, go back in here. Let's go to my next. Thank you, JakeBot is saying I can use Control plus or Control minus to increase and decrease the text. Thank you, I appreciate that. I have not gotten around to looking up the hotkey. I just do it and then I'm like, I just couldn't reset it. All right, so now I've gotten 2 of these done, right? So I got the head, I got the body. Now we're gonna clean up this one. So instead of doing it manually now, I can go to macro, and reload all those bad boys, click the Shadowbox cleanup, and now you can sit back and relax. It's gonna process that entire thing, and there we got a result. Do the same one on this. Now one thing I probably wanted to do for these two, which it's a little bit too late now, is I had those harsh edges. I probably should have applied some different poly grouping to make these shapes a little straighter on these edges here. I could probably do that now. I'll do it on this one. Because after I went and generated all these nice nice harsh edges, I just went through and just destroyed them all. So this should, let me change my tolerance here. So these groups by normals will work to get a view sometimes these angles, but oftentimes with Shadowbox, if you don't have that polish on, you can see that I'm getting partial groups, but not everything. So if I really want to clean these up, what I'm gonna have to do is just come through and isolate these guys. And this is what I should have done for the initial parts, because some of them got a little bit too soft for the mech shape, but we'll fix those later. All right, so there we go. So that part now has polygroups on all those edges. So you can mess with the groups by normals and change this max angle until you find it. The one thing with this right now, since I did not have that polish high when I did the Shadowbox, all these edges have the potential chance to get hit by that groups by normal. So I just chose the quickest one there so you guys don't have to see me fiddle with this max resolution slider, and then set those out like that. Another one you can do for polygrouping that's awesome if you have like stuff that's squarish is you can use the Zmodeler Brush, and there's a group polygroups mode you can use that will do it based on your world axis. So it'll do left, right, top, bottom, side, and it'll give a different polygroup to that, like a box mapped polygrouping, which is really nice too. All right, so now I'm gonna clean up this one with that one, and this one's gonna actually give me harsh edges this time because I established better groups. And there we go, that part there. So that one's good. Actually, I may go fix this other one. This one got too crazy. Too crazy. So let's do this one more time. This one had an extra piece of floating geometry. So when you're using Shadowbox 2, be wary of floating geo, because that will make fun things too. And then group by normals, change this down. See, that's too crazy. That's pretty close. Another thing with polygroups, so you can see here that I pretty much got all the sides I wanted out of the Shadowbox geo, but you see I got these rainbows going around the edges here. So there's an option in here too that you can merge stray groups. So this is a big help too, especially if you have, like I have 90% of these polygroups where I want them, except I have these stray groups along the edges. So if you do merge stray groups, this is gonna go through and find those and then merge them. So that's another big one too. So you can see now I'm down to just those normal groups instead of all that rainbow coloring. So another little thing there, and then we'll run that macro again. Oh, much better. Much better. I got some craziness. What we got going on here? Craziness. I'll show you guys how to fix that too. All right, all right. Everybody still with me? Everybody following along? Is this my head? I gotta fix the head. Sorry. I can't keep the head a box. After I used all those great straight edges. See if 15 is the magic number again. Boom. That's pretty good. Merge straight groups. And I could have added this to the macro too, which would make it even faster. There we go. That's good enough. That's good enough. All right. One more. Sorry, guys. I just have these nice angles. Can't take it. Can't take it. If you have any questions about anything, now's a good time too. Now, in addition to just using the macro stuff that I'm doing here for this, now we got a little bit crazy. Let's merge stray groups again. And if you get too much crazy with the stray groups, what you can do is also use visibility, and then you can grow it and shrink it. So Control-Shift-S will shrink, Control-Shift-X will grow. So I can come and just try to get those groups, and then hit Control-W, which will group mask, clear mask, and that'll give me a new polygroup there. And I can grow this a little bit too, make sure it's not. So I think that, oh, there's one there. So you can use that to clean up polygroups too. Uh-oh, too much. Well, maybe go with this. Uh-oh, stencil. That's what happens when I get click crazy. Let's not do that stencil. All right, clean that up. There you go, that's better. Another thing too, if you're doing recording stuff or processes multiple times across different pieces, there's also a plugin you can download, and it is called Zrepeat. And this will allow you to do basically the same thing I was doing with the macro stuff, but it has some stuff built in to help you. So one thing it will do is you can link it to a editor, so you can edit it. You can also store multiple scripts, so you can come through and store multiple things. And then with that, you can also have it repeat. So with the macro I made, it's only going to work on a single subtool unless I add code to the macro to make it work on everything. The Zrepeat plugin will allow you to take that macro, you can load it in, and then it will store it in its database here, and you can cycle through these. And then after you have one of these selected, you can then process that across the selected, visible, or all. So a little speedy thing, especially if, you know, what I could have done is loaded that script that I made into here, and then selected it, and then did all, and it would have went through all my subtools and processed every single one of those Shadowbox one automatically, rather than me going in and doing it manually. So another little thing there, Zrepeat plugin, and you can get that on the Resource Center too. Let's do this group by normal here. Merge straight groups, and we'll macro that. So John has a question. What's your question? So John has a question about the ray and other odd 2.5D tools. So what's your question on those? I may be able to answer that. Just put them in the chat. All right, so I'm gonna continue this. So here we have my Shadowbox mesh going into this stage now, and each of these are broken into different parts. So I've used the Zremesher and some other processes. We stored a macro so I could process them across multiple tools. Now that this macro is made, now next time I use this process of generating geometry from Shadowbox, I can just simply clean it up with one click. So I don't have to go through and remember the steps, do all this other stuff. So it's handy to come through and take the time to generate the code to automate something, especially if you're going to do it multiple times. So it's one of those things that you're like, I don't know if I want to spend the time to code the quick macro. I could just go through and do them all manually. Yeah, but then an hour later, you may have to do more of them or something like that, and then you're going to be like, oh, I wish I just would have recorded the macro. So with this, now I've got this part here. Now this part's pretty clean, except you can see that I've got some weirdness happening here. So if I smooth this out, I got some double verts. And this is a process of Zremesher and then the mirror and weld. So those verts were not super happy. So I ended up with some weird topo through here. So I don't want that. So what I'm gonna do is I'll show you another way you can kind of clean up things along the symmetrical line. This is just a little trick. So basically you come through and you grab, let's get the mask pen back. So I'm gonna hold down Control to get my mask selection. And if you use this and then hold Alt, this is going to give you a selection versus a mask. So if you have nothing masked on your model and you hold down Control to get the mask pen and you drag it out, so you end up with a box like this. So this is what you normally would have. If you hold down Alt, you're going to get this white, so the unmasked box. And if you apply this to a mesh that has no masking, it's going to perform a mask to every area outside the box and leave the area inside the box unmasked. So as I come across this part here and do this, it's going to mask this edge and keep that inner edge unmasked. So this one is one of the things where I'll show people and they'll be like, what? So I'm going to go through it a few times because not a lot of people know about it and it's really handy. So normally if I wanted to, oh man, who had Dynamesh on? Let's turn that off. So I want to move this middle point, right? So I want to mask this and I want to mask this so then I can come through and move that, right? But instead of doing that process, that's 2 steps, right? So 1, 2, and then that gives me the unmasked portion. Instead of doing that, what I can do is I can start masking the middle section, or the section I want to be unmasked, and then hold down Alt, and then now that process is going to be done for me. So it's going to mask everything that's not inside that unmasked area. And so now I just did that in 1 step instead of 2, and now I can move this over here or over here. Now once this is moved, what I'm doing is I'm moving this point off, right? I'm moving it outside the zone. Because what I want to do is, this one had that crazy little line thing going on here. So I'm moving it over to the side over here, and then I'm going to use mirror and weld, and I'm going to remove it, right? So I'm going to use mirror and weld to remove that anomaly. So come back down here. I'm still in the Z-axis for that mirror and weld, and let me make sure I'm actually in the right side there. So sometimes you have to remember what side to mirror on. And then if I click mirror and weld, you can see now it's taken this side and put it over there, which removed that anomaly. And so now I should no longer have that crazy geo that was happening in the middle edge there. So that one is now cleaned up. And do that process again on this one because this one got some craziness happening too. So first thing for this is I've got some edge loops in here. We're gonna get the Zmodeler Brush. I'm just gonna expand this out so it's just a little bit clearer. So we got some little craziness through here, a lot of weird edge loops going down. So we want to clean this up. So for this, I'm going to come back to my facial angle that's correct. That's the Z right there. And I want to take all this stuff and I'm going to move it over here like that. And then now I'm gonna do that mirror and weld, and you see it's gonna remove it. So little quick trick there to kind of clean up geo. So you can see I had this mangled mess. I took it. I know my symmetry line is down through here right now. Moved it over, mirror and weld, and now clean that up. Now these other areas down here are gonna take a little more clean up. So I've got some crazy edges through here. So I want to bridge these 2 points, which is basically going to clean this up. So hover over a point, and this is going to Zmodeler here, and I'm going to do a bridge. And we're going to do 2 points, 1 point and second point. So that's going to give me that edge. And do the same thing over here. Once again, I could just mirror this too. Now I've got that. I'm going to slide this point because it's a mess. You guys are getting some cleanup techniques too today. And then I want to remove this edge and that edge. And then let's see what's going on back here. Now there's a ton of ways you can go through and kind of clean up stuff with Zmodeler. We're kind of just going in crazy now. Then I'm going to collapse this edge. That should be better than what we had. You can also align stuff with the clip brush too, so you can see how this face is not aligned. So I'm coming here and use the unmasked option there to get that so it's clear, and then we use the clip brush. And the clip brush is going to smash geometry to the line, so you can use this to align edges. So I can come through and smash it to there, and then maybe do something like this. Get that angle. And then I can clean up these side edges too. And then we mirror weld one more time. So there we go. That's pretty good for that one too. So that would be the process I go through, is I just go through and just get them down to like a lower resolution version of them. And some of these still have some messes in here that I can still clean up, like I can still collapse these edges. But really, the stage I'm going for this is I just wanted to box out, block out, and didn't really want it to be super clean because I'm just gonna modify this and then apply other stuff later. So I'm gonna work on the bust here. We're gonna turn off the arms now because I've sucked up too much time on my my tangent down the Zmodeler avenue, or the macro generation. So I'm going to scale this out. So there we have my kind of robot torso there. Once again, if I want this to be flat, I can use that clip curve brush again, flatten that right down. And then I can use mirror and weld to get the other side symmetrical. So there we have the start of a torso there for our robot. Looking at questions here quick. So John has a question about the 2.5D stuff. So if you ever come over to the, let's see, if these show up here. Here, we'll go quick tangent here. Let's copy this tool. Let me save this quick so we don't get all over the place. So John had a quick thing about asking about the 2.5D mode stroke stuff. So in here you have a bunch of different kind of options for 2.5D, and these are all just going to give you different results. So oftentimes you have the dots and the planar and all the other ones, and they're basically just going to give you different brush strokes to your mesh. So whatever you choose, they're going to end up doing different things based on them. Now some of these require different attributes to kind of be loaded. So some of them may require a 3D mesh, others may require a different pen stroke. But these are mostly just all kind of legacy things for painting in 2.5D. So the only time you're going to ever see these strokes are going to be if you're using the 2.5D stuff. And if you're in 2.5D, your model's dropped to the canvas. So my model isn't vanished, it's over here still in the tool palette, but right now it's in 2.5D. And what you can do with this is you can kind of use it to generate, I did a Z Classroom video last week on kind of using it to make alphas and tiling textures and things like that. And some of these different stroke options will just be handy with that, but some of them only work with certain brushes. So you just kind of have to go through and find what they're doing. a lot of them, I couldn't tell you the last time I've used some of these. So there's the line one. And then like I can't remember how the conic works. The planar dot may need a shift option. But yeah, it's been a while. So, but that's what they're there. It's more just playing with them and seeing how they're doing it. Some of them do them off the surface normals of the surface that's in 2.5D. So it just varies depending on what they are. Yeah, I can probably dig up some documentation that'll go through the entirety of those, but my brain for being refreshed on those is not well refreshed. It's been a while. We're talking probably 5 years or so since I've actually messed with these, but I'll see if I can dig up some stuff, recall some stuff in my brain on how they work, and then I'll see about doing a Ask ZBrush video on those and the different strokes and what they do. Because they're kind of cool for generating, you know, different things and different designs. So, but it's all 2.5D, but you can always grab them from the alpha grab doc option, and they'll actually give you a texture map off them, which is kind of cool. Anyhow, tangent fun. Question, using the option of merge vertices instead of mirror and weld. So you can use the option to merge so question asking about using geometry, modify topology weld points, and there's a weld distance. So this will weld points as well. The thing with the welds, rather than going through and doing this kind of mirror and weld option process, is that the weld will only happen if it can. Right? So if I crank this up and click weld, you can see nothing's going to happen. And if you have a point that can't be welded, so if I have something like, it's going to give a good example, but so if I had something like this, or something where it's like not going to allow me to weld, so like this point would be right on top of that other point, but it's not going to perform the weld because that is not going to give you a set of geometry that's actually going to work, that ZBrush is going to allow. So if the weld would give you n-gons, or the weld would give you kind of coplanar surfaces, you're not going to be able to get that process. So those areas that I had that I cleaned up with mirror and weld on this main part here, the weld wouldn't have fixed those because they were basically stuck on top of each other, and they were also going to generate a coplanar surface if they welded. So ZBrush would have been like, no, we're not touching those. So that's why doing that, shifting all the geometry off and doing the mirror and weld was the only real solution for that, unless I wanted to rip it all apart and generate it. I could also went in and manually cleaned it up, but for just selecting and moving and clicking a button, it was faster for me in terms of that than going in and manually cleaning it. But that's the main reason why that weld didn't happen. So if I go back in time here, let's try this one here. And if I do the weld, see, it's not going to process. And even if I came through and say, got these and scaled them down, oops, to collapse on each other and weld, well, it did work some, but I probably still have whole geometry through here somewhere. So I don't know. Sometimes it'll work, sometimes it won't. So I did okay there. For the most part, because these were going to give me decent geo. That one I had originally was definitely not going to work because it had triangular forms in it. So it just depends on the model. But you can increase that weld slider and do it. But the mirror and weld is usually more reliable for what I end up doing. Like I know exactly what it's going to give me rather than may or may not. So it just depends. Question about masking with the Ctrl key. So yeah, if you have the gizmo and you hold Control and drag, it's going to allow you to apply this mask. So as you hold Control and drag, and if you're in Transpose, clicking on a polygroup will mask or unmask it. Let me get off my polyframes here. So the transpose line will give you that functionality of clicking to mask. The gizmo will not. Oh, maybe it will. So it's just a control click. So gizmo, control, hold down control, click. And then if you click and drag, it'll do this. And then you also have the brush that is the Smart Transpose. And this one will look at the geometry and transpose based off of that, or mask based off of that. And this will allow you to get kind of like surfaces. So this mesh really doesn't have enough geometry to kind of show this. Let's divide it up. If you click and drag this, it'll try to look at the geo and generate masking based on that. So that's another way. So you can grow it out. It'll hold to that edge. But you really have to have enough geometry. This low resolution mesh here isn't going to really show it all that well. It's hard to see. But that's a Smart Transpose too. I usually end up, it just depends on what I'm doing for it, but most of the times for masking things, instead of switching to say the gizmo, like if I'm doing something like this and I'm already in a Zmodeler Brush, I could go, like to do that, to mask this polygroup would require me to go to the gizmo, mask, and then go back to draw. And so I'll just usually end up, just selecting the polygroup, holding control, dragging quick, and unhiding to get my masks. So it just depends what work mode you're in. All right, so back on tangent here. I've got about 30 minutes. Let's see what I can get done. All right. So I've got my robot bust here, and this was after I did my Shadowbox, made a macro, went on a tangent, did all sorts of things. So now I want to actually start, modeling some forms here onto this. So this is just the base. I could have done this with the Zmodeler Brush to start with, which probably would have been a little smarter at this stage. But I wanted to sketch some and then do that and then generate my shapes from it. So now what I do is I'll come in and I'll look at ways to make this a little more interesting. So right now this is very, flat. It's not really doing much. So I can come through and start cleaning this up with the Zmodeler Brush. I can start moving like edge loops out of here. I'm in the insert single edge loop mode. So like this little area through here kind of has some warpiness to it. So I can remove these. And what did I do here? I done broke my ZBrush. I done broke something. Hold on. I'm gonna blame 2.5D tangent. Let's restart this quick. So while I'm doing that, hit up you guys again. So next week, for all you guys and gals that are at home, I'm looking for stuff to do, and we've released the trial version of 2020, which has a 30-day trial. So if you have anyone that wants to mess with ZBrush, learn ZBrush, play about ZBrush, definitely you can grab the trial and try it for 30 days. During this time and this great, all the mess that's happening right now, and all the people working from home, we're doing a thing next week we're going to start where we're going to be streaming every day and doing like ZBrush basics. So we're going to go through getting into ZBrush, using ZBrush, starting it. So if you've never touched ZBrush or know someone that really wants to use ZBrush and they've never messed with it, then download the trial and then log into our streams and we'll go through like the very basic principles. So like, Z Classroom Live is what we're going to end up calling it. So going through all the initial stuff that people may run into, and also just these pretty much like 2-hour projects, we'll go through and try to get any new users with, say, access to the trial to come through and use it. So I got something going on here. Let's see what this is. I made a mess somehow. Made a mess. So something happened here, and I think I have 2 geometry islands sitting on top of each other. Or not. You get to see support live now. Definitely have something going on with this mesh. All right, there we go. I don't know. I have 2 of them. I did a duplication. That's what it is. Craziness. All right. So I have some curvature in here that I don't like. Like this area here is kind of doing this weird bubble thing. So to fix this, I can start removing some of these loops through here, and just holding Alt and clicking, and that will take those out. Now once I remove these, I may find that, hey, I want some of these back. And some of these I will add to curvature, and so we have an option now that you can use with the Insert Edge Multi. There's a smooth elevation option, and you can use this, and ZBrush will look at the curvature and smooth it back out. So now I'm getting these kind of smooth, and it's going to look at the surrounding curvature of the mesh. So this is a good way to say, come in, if you have something that's rough and you want to go back in and smooth it out, you just go to the Insert Multi-Edge Loop, and then down here underneath Target in the modifier area, there's a smooth elevation, and you can use this, and I'll add an edge loop and then look at the surface curvature and try to calculate that. So you can see now I'm getting that nice and smooth through there. So you can clean up different parts of your mesh, that way if needed. Now with this part here, so this is going to be like his chest piece here, I need to add some more interesting forms to this. And for this, I can add some edge loops. So I can come in and say, let's get back out of that smooth elevation. So I can add multiple edge loops. I can add single edge loops. I'm going to turn on symmetry and add those in. Now I've still angled in the wrong direction here, because basically when I use Shadowbox, it's going to use that back plane to get my quick geometry, but I want to end up having my model facing down the front. So you can see the head and my mesh do not match. So I'm going to move everything and rotate it in space to get it so it's going the right direction. And to do this, I could do it manually. So say going to the Gizmo 3D, I'm going to reset the rotation and lock it. I can go to each one and say rotate it 90 degrees. But instead of going to each one, what I'm going to do is I'm going to use the pizza box option, or the transpose all selected subtools. So I just activated the Gizmo 3D, went into move, scale, or rotate. Now I'm going to activate transpose all selected subtools. And now with this active, it's going to look at all the subtools I have in my scene. And now if I rotate, they're all going to rotate. And then now I can hold down Shift and snap that to 90 degrees. Then I can get out of the pizza boxes. And now I can recenter these back to the world with another macro. So I have a reset 0 the X. And I can press down to select my next subtool, 0, 0, 0, and 0. And everything's back in the center of the world. For this little arm here, I'm just going to bring him out to the side. And then we're going to do a mirror and weld, just so I got 2 of them. And then we're going to take this part, and we're going to scale him out a little bit. And then take this part, center, and scale him out as well. So there we go. Now we got a little more interest going on there with my robot here. Now for the next parts, I'm going to add some edge loops. So coming in, now that I have my symmetry set up, my model's facing the right direction, I can now use symmetry, and that'll add me to add some edges in here. So I can add a whole bunch of these, and then just add some different designs or styles, what I'll do is just cut a few in, and then I'll say take the Q mesh action and start dragging some parts out. So adding some stuff here, maybe adding some stuff here. And this is just using the Zmodeler brush. Now Zmodeler Brush has some other interesting options in it that I'll use quite a bit. So I'll add edges. You can come through and remove them. And this little white polygroup that keeps flashing is a temporary polygroup. So the Zmodeler Brush has a series of actions you can use, and then it has a series of targets. And the targets are going to let you know where that action is going to be performed. Now in addition to these targets, you can also set up temporary ones, which is this white polygroup. So if I want to perform an action here, I can press that white polygroup to have it set there, and then I can say perform it over here, and then I can perform it here. And now when I do this, performing this action, it's going to go anywhere that white polygroup is. So I can use Q mesh now, and it's going to pull out at all those surfaces. So you can see now I've just done that and add a little more interest there to that shape. So I'll do things like this and just pull things up. I can also detach whole parts. So let's say I want to grab this area through here. So I'm just going to have that as my white polygroup. I'm going to use that Q mesh action to pull, and then I'm going to hold down Control to separate it. So it's going to pop that face off, and now I have floating geo. Then I can come across that area again. I can tag it all with Alt, and now add that. So this will allow you to kind of build on your forms too. And now I can continue Q meshing this out, adding more elements to this model. So that's the kind of basics of what I'll end up doing with this. And I'll just come through and find areas that I like or don't like, and then just keep manipulating my mesh. So maybe these I want to go in, so Q mesh those in. Then maybe I don't want this there. So remove that, remove that. I got too much there. So I have this extra edge loop through here. So let's see if I can get rid of that quick. Nope, not quite doing what I want. There we go, that's better. Add some edges in here.